On today's video, I'm reviewing Detective Season 1 from Portal Games' line of the Detective series. It's standalone, so is this worthy as a first entry point for newcomers, or is it just basically more of the same that you can get later? Let's find out. Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector from the Broken Meeple, and if you're new to this channel then please stay tuned to find out more about games, old and new, and the people who play them. For those not aware of what the Detective line is, it's a series of board games designed by Ignacy Trzewiczek and a fair few other designers across the way, and brought out by Portal Games. It is a brain-burny deduction style game where you and a group of other people, or solo if you want, will try and solve a case. Think CSI, Law & Order, all those kinds of shows. The case is given to you from a summary as well as a deck of cards, each card containing a new narrative aspect as well as links to other leads that you'll be able to follow in order to try and solve the case. As well as this, you'll also have access to a website, a purpose-designed website by Portal Games, which allows you to find out details on fingerprints, mugshots, profiles, file questionings, interrogations, that sort of thing, all on a big screen, almost kind of like immersing you in this detective world. Originally, Portal Games brought out a base set with 5 missions in it. It was part of an extended campaign, and it was hard as all get out. Trying to solve this case was enough to really test your brain cells and detective skills to the limit. It required a decent group to be really focused and get into it, with each scenario taking a good 2 to 3 hours to complete. They were pretty sizable missions. Since then, Portal Games have brought out another smaller free mission campaign, which has a similar time length for each mission, but only 3 missions, and it was set in the 80s, so for me, it was certainly a good thematic crosspoint. There have also been 1 or 2 standalone cases which have been done by other designers, and now we have Detective Season 1. It's designed to be a standalone box set, so it has components tailored to these 3 cases, so you don't have to have previously bought the original Detective base set or any of the other ones in order to play this. The 3 standalone cases are separate from each other. This is not a campaign set. Each case takes place in a different period, a different time, a different area, and so playing one case has no effect on the other 2 cases. So this now means that you can jump into Detective via this set rather than having to go to the other one. So the big question is this set worth getting if you're a Detective fan, and is it worth considering perhaps if you've never played Detective before? Well, let's talk into detail. D for duration, these cases are a little bit shorter than the other ones that we've done before. The ones in the main box and LA Crimes would take you a good 2 to 3 hours to complete, particularly if you had a big group of you. Potentially longer if you really want to go really detailed with the mind mapping and stuff. But here, each case roughly takes about 60 to 90 minutes. It takes me about an hour to play each one, maybe an hour 20 minutes with solo mode, and that's with me trying to take notes and take care of it. If you're playing in a group, you're probably looking at a 90-minute time frame, but at absolute max, probably 2 hours. This one is definitely a much, shall we say, easier intro level to the cases, at least from a time perspective, and the fact that you don't have to play them as one big extended campaign is great, because it means that you can just set aside a night to say, you know what, I just feel like going through this case, and then it doesn't matter if it takes you another, say, 2 months before you ever take the game off the shelf again, because the other cases aren't related to each other. In terms of ease of play, it's about the same as the original Detective set, although I would argue that this one is a little bit easier for people to get into. Remember, the previous set, the main box set, had 5 missions in it, and they were all linked, and it was an extensive campaign, 2 to 3 hours apiece. Now you have 3 standalone cases, 90 minutes max, and as a result, the deck of cards is a little bit smaller. There's still plenty of leads you can follow, and certainly as I found out, if you go down the wrong lead, you're kind of screwed for the whole mission really, but you at least it's a bit easier to grasp what is going on. I don't feel like I have to research a ton of things on Wikipedia and take a mind map of the entire wall covered up by a mind map in order to try and sort out what's going on. Now that's not to say that these cases are easy, they're not. I mean, you can still go down the wrong route or follow a lead that's not much, and you have probably less time to do the case than you do previously. In the other games you had several days and you had to worry about overtime and stress and things like that. Here, the rules have been a bit more streamlined. You no longer have multiple days and overtime and stress. You simply have one time track. It goes up to a max of 24, the scenarios will differ, but you basically just carry on until you get to the end and then you've got to do your final report. So stress is completely gone from the game. You no longer have character abilities, which is a little bit of a negative. I would have liked to have had some kind of ability, but then to be honest, in the previous set, the only thing the characters really did that was noticeable was they allowed you to take different tokens that allowed you to progress through certain cards based on what expertise the character had, like a hacker or a negotiator or whatever. But here, you have a set of tokens, but it's one type of token. It's a universal token, you get so many to start the game with, and all your characters are literally just an ID card for thematic purposes. I would actually dare say that if you are new to Detective, you should ignore the previous big box set of Detective and start with this one. Regarding tactics and strategy, well, it's a deduction game, so it's kind of hard to distinguish it by tactics and strategy, but you still have to put in the same amount of effort as you did in other detective games. Even though the cases are a little bit easier and a little bit narrower in scope, there are still multiple leads you can follow. The first case in particular, the natural causes one, there is one particular route you can go down to have a good time of like, alright, yeah, this is what it is, and this is the motive, etc. I'm not trying to spoil here. But you could easily go down a tangent on certain other leads, wasting your time at some or not finding out the key pieces of information you need, and you can mess yourself up. In fact, that's probably one slight negative I have, is that with the previous cases, yes, if you went down a tangent, you start running out of time, but I felt that if you did it once or twice, you could probably pick yourself up if you were able to get back on the right track. With this one, you don't have a lot of time in each scenario. So if you go far down a tangent on one particular lead, you're not likely to have enough time to go to a different lead and follow it through to the end in order to see, oh, I really should have found out that. So you may find that you'll play the scenario and then fail it because you didn't go down the right leads. Not too bad, it's a little minor negative, but what you can do is, because this is a shorter campaign, you can simply just reset and go again and then try the different leads. It doesn't feel quite as punishing as, say, doing that in the other box set, where after a 3-hour game, if you fail the scenario, it's like, oh, we better start again, this is going to be a mission. Nah, especially if you play this solo, you're talking a 60-minute time frame. It was easy enough for me on the first mission, which I did admittedly fail on my first attempt because I went down the wrong lead and didn't have enough time for the rest, that I thought, oh, I failed. Oh well, reset. Go again, let's go. And then 60 minutes later, or even if that, probably 45 minutes later, boom, I'm done. I found out what I was meant to do, succeeded, top marks, and it was all good. And don't be fooled into thinking that they are just like, oh, this is a kid's walk now. Granted, if you're used to doing the previous sets, you may find these easier than, well, you will find these easier than the previous sets, but it still requires you to think. You can't go on autopilot. You can't just read a bunch of cards and go, oh yeah, I've worked it out. And it's not like the clues, like the cards themselves, give you the answer. They don't. When you get to the questions at the end for your final report, you have to make some assumptions based on what you have learned. It's not like the cards simply say, this person did it and he did it with this and it was, it was mustard with the lead piping in the lounge. The end. No, you have to connect the dots and try and piece together what happened, as a proper detective does. In terms of aesthetics, there's not a huge amount to talk about here. You have a deck of cards, the components that you do get in a game, you get a little board, some little wooden pieces and that. It's not like stellar production quality because, let's face it, you don't need a lot in this game. It's mainly the cards. Where the effort and production go into is the design of the scenarios themselves. The cards are fine, some of them are pretty text heavy, you're going to have to get used to it, but I personally didn't have a problem with reading the story, understanding it. I didn't feel that there was a particular language barrier with anything, with obviously being maybe translated from Polish to English, but I found it pretty fine. It does the job. The cards I can read. Yes, some of them are text heavy as I said, but if you're going to have to get used to reading in order to play this game anyway. It's not pictorial representation or anything, it is text. But apart from that, it all looks the part, and if you've played any of the other detective games, it's kind of the same thing. It's just it's been scaled down a bit because you don't have to worry about like 100 mugshots and tons of other counters as well. It's a streamlined version. For Immersion, how good is the theme? Well, Have you checked out my other detective review yet before you got to this section? Yeah, it's immersive. This is one of the best deduction games out there from being a detective that there is. This is on par with the likes of Sherlock Consulting Detective and Chronicles of Crime, I'd probably say as well, maybe to a lesser extent with that one. And, you know, the theme is super strong. You are reading it, you are getting into the story, it feels like a proper CSI episode. In fact, with these ones being standalone, if you imagine the original Detective being like a full-on movie or one big series with an overarching like plot twist and that, this one is more like CSI if you had Mission of the Week or Criminal of the Week. You know, in this episode, somebody kidnapped so-and-so, they gotta find it, and it all wraps up at the end and everything's all good. Pretty much that's what these standalone cases are. It's a good short story type thing. I mean, it's called Season 1. So you might as well imagine it as a season of individual episodes. But each one has a very different story, different characters, different things you've got to look out for, little twists. You do find out, you know, interesting little plot points where you think, oh yeah, I'm totally thinking it's gotta be this, it's gotta be this. You get to the end, it's like, oh well, sucks to be me, you know, and you do get into those situations quite often. But it's very much like the previous detectives. The theme is well represented here. It's one of the reasons I love this series a lot. It's because it gives me a good challenge while engrossing me in not only an interesting story, but also a challenging deduction tale as well. Elva longevity, and this is the flaw with the detective series kind of in general, really. I mean, it's repeated here, it's no different from the other sets. When you play through these cases, you are basically playing through it a maximum of 2 times. The first time if you fail it, and then the second time to succeed. But if you succeed it first time, you're unlikely to play this ever again. Maybe if you wait a year before you play it again, so you've completely forgotten what happened in the story, and then you play it with completely new people, then yeah. But as it is with these games, campaign games and legacy style games, it is a case of once you know the story, you kind of know the story. And with this, you're talking 90 minutes tops for a case, so 90 minutes times 3, hour and a half, 3 hours, 4.5 hours, you're talking anywhere between 4 to 5 hours worth of content in this box, which is not a lot. But then it's not a particularly expensive set either. And it is, as I said, an entry point into Detective. And for those of us who like Detective and just want more content, then think of it as an expansion where you can have 3 more entertaining cases. The game caters for up to 4 players typically, although I would say, particularly with these cases, that 4 players may be a little bit overkill. In the previous editions, 4 players was actually quite useful because there was so much to have to deal with that it was a mind bender trying to do it by yourself or even with just a couple of you. So 3 and 4 players actually had more of a use. But with these ones, maybe you can taper the player count a little bit. 4 players I feel would just be a little bit overkill. There's only so much in each case that you have to deal with, so you may find that even though you're discussing things as a group, there's only so much for an individual person to do. This is perfect though if you've got 2 players who want to play this. It is fantastic as a solo mode because I can literally just go, right, I've got a spare 90 minutes, so I'm just going to go, whoop, flip this case, do it. I can handle what's the information's in there by myself, and I'm kind of done. So this actually for some reason caters better for solo and 2 player than it does for 3 and 4. Not to say you can't do 3 and 4, but just accept that you're more in it for the experience rather than the individual mechanical side of it. So my final word on Detective Season 1 is that it's another great addition to the lineup. If you were a fan of Detective, you're going to enjoy this as well. It's more content, more cases that are easier to access, and that is probably the biggest selling point of this set. I've always thought that Detective was great, but even I had to admit, wow, you need to be in the right mindset and the right frame of mind and have a commitment to do the original box set with the 5 mission campaigns. It's why I was glad that the LA Crime set was only 3. But even then, that's a campaign, they link together, you need to have some awareness of what happened before, you can't afford to leave too much of a time gap between sessions. You know, there is still a flaw with campaigns like this. But the standalone cases, I'm really behind. All the ones that I've seen so far, the extra ones by designers, the ones that are going to come out for this set in future times, because I mean it's called Season 1. I'm sure there'll be a Season 2 and a Season 3 and all that stuff to come with more cases, sign me up. but what makes this one solid in particular is the fact that I can recommend this as an entry point for those who have never played Detective before. It's easier to grok, there's less rules to absorb, it's still gonna give you the challenge and the theme, but not require such a hefty commitment of time. So my final verdict for Detective Season 1 is an astounding 9 out of 10. I can't quite give it the full 10 out of 10 treatment because it is essentially more of the same, but I do have to give it props for the fact that it does cater to a new audience as well as fans of the original game. But I gotta duck it slightly because you are removing some aspects like player abilities and some of the extra rules, which is obviously taking out content, but also the fact that because these are smaller cases, as much as I like smaller cases, obviously this gives you a little bit less of replay value than it does compared to the original Detective, which would easily set you back a good, say, 15 hours worth of content, 12 perhaps if you're playing it solo, just because for how long that campaign was. Now, I hope you've been enjoying the content on the Broken Meeple, but I am not the guru of board games. I always suggest that you should watch other channels in order to get multiple opinions before you make any decision, particularly on a purchasing note. So I want you to check out other smaller creators as well, and for starters, why don't you begin with this young lady?
Hi everybody, I'm Jonna from One Pip Wonder. I have a YouTube channel about board gaming. I like to review board games and talk about the things I like and don't like. I have a bunch of little top 5s about different subjects in regards to board games. I do vlogs of our board game group. I have sessions of our D&D sessions with our awesome D&D group, and I like to play minis on occasion. Yeah, and also I play board games with my kids, and they help me review some of our kid games, which has been really fun. And that's pretty much it. Except for one thing. My board games talk. I know it's really weird, but I don't really know what to do about it. So I've been recording them in secret. I don't know how ethical that is, but it makes for some good content because they have some very strong opinions about things. Other than that, my channel is perfectly normal. I promise. Thank you so much, Luke, for this opportunity to share my channel with everybody, and I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you around.
So that's all from me on this video. If you've enjoyed the content and you like what you see, then please click the avatar in the center of the screen to subscribe. Alternatively, you can check out my recent content, including a folded space insert review and also my recent podcast episode. Take care, and as always, remember, it's only a game.